An MP has commented on the column Jeremy Clarkson wrote a little while ago about Meghan Markle, and finally, someone supports him. Let's talk about that now on Groundhog Nation. I'm Alex Harrington. Let's get into it. Culture Secretary Michelle Donelan has talked about the controversial column that Jeremy Clarkson wrote on Meghan Markle, where he said that he dreams of the day when she's made to parade naked through the streets of every town in Britain while the crowds chant shame and throw lumps of excrement at her. This column, safe to say, did not go down well. It's since been deleted by The Sun. The Sun kind of apologised and then reached out to Meghan Markle for a comment, obviously just wanting the next article. Jeremy Clarkson also kind of apologised on Twitter. He said, "Oh dear, I've rather put my foot in it. In a column I wrote about Meghan, I made a clumsy reference to a scene in Games of Thrones, and this has gone down badly with a great many people. I'm horrified to have caused so much hurt, and I shall be more careful in the future." Yes, it wasn't really an apology, but he did at least kind of make a statement. It didn't go down well. It was trending on Twitter for a long time, and people called out to get Jeremy Clarkson cancelled. I don't know if people are still saying that. Cancel culture, is that still a thing? Probably is, knowing people. Even Amazon was, according to certain sources, not my own sources, but according to reports, even Amazon said that they were very annoyed with him and that they were potentially thinking about cancelling the Grand Tour and Clarkson's farm and things like that. Obviously, nothing ever came from it, but the thought was there potentially. But now, Michelle Donelan, our old culture... Oh, I shouldn't call her old. I don't know how old she is, just so you know. Our lovely culture secretary in the UK, she has recently been discussing the UK's online safety bill, which talks about harmful material online, things involving children and online bullying and that kind of horrible stuff. And obviously the column with Clarkson came up because a lot of people have classed it as being a form of online bullying. Even Clarkson's daughter came out and said that it was online bullying and that she was very disappointed and that she was distancing herself from that because she has been the victim of online bullying before. So, on the Newsagents podcast, Donelan has said, "But what we can do is people can air their opinions against views. They can challenge them, they can force apologies, they can make them think again. And of course, we all have a responsibility when we use our words to think about the words that we're using." Did Jeremy Clarkson make a mistake? Yes, he did, but he certainly shouldn't be outlawed or censored. That's down to the individual to think about what they're saying and doing. Now, the podcast host, Emily Maitlis, she responded saying, basically, how do we know what's online bullying and what's freedom of speech? There's obviously a massive grey area here. She says, "I'm just trying to work out how arbitrary it is to say press freedom's fine, but online harm is terrible and we've got to stop that when it's quite often the same content." And I do actually agree with that a lot. From the perspective of not seeing Game of Thrones, I know it's the minority of people, but let's say you haven't seen Game of Thrones. Let's say the person that Jeremy is talking about, Meghan Markle, she hadn't seen Game of Thrones, and she would have just read that thinking, why does he want to throw shit at me? Does that come across as bullying? I suppose it kind of does. And I know a lot of you are going to say, no, he wasn't bullying, he was just making a reference. It's such a grey area, we can't define it. Anyway, Donelan responded saying they weren't illegal, they were outrageous. Then he faced a great outcry following them, and he had to apologise very publicly. But I do think what we're talking about here as well, especially, is we're talking about kids seeing content that promotes suicide, self-harm, sexual abuse. These are dreadful, horrendous things that we've got to shut down. And while we can all criticise Clarkson for what he said, I don't think we should be comparing apples with pears. I don't think that's most helpful. Yeah, of course, obviously. How is there any sense in comparing what Clarkson said to grooming children online? That MPs, man. Of course, were people comparing them? Clarkson just said something a bit iffy online. He wasn't... Unbelievable. How is this reality right now? Anyway, the column did receive a record number of complaints, but those complaints weren't sent to a company looking after young children online, were they? They were sent to the Independent Press Standards Organization. Again, not a comparison. This whole thing has been completely blown out of proportion, and the fact we're still talking about this, however long it's been since it happened, is insane. People are still complaining about it on Twitter. People are still trying to cancel Jeremy. And, you know, yes, fine. Let's say he did something wrong. Do we have to drag it on for this long? I don't know. Maybe it's not my question to answer. Maybe it's your question to answer. So let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm so done, and I just want the Grand Tour back. And following the news, which I haven't heard anything yet, by the way, I did email sources close to the Grand Tour, and I have not heard anything. I think I've been ghosted because, I don't know, the fact I haven't heard anything makes me think the Grand Tour isn't going to be around in 2023. I think they would have emailed saying, no, that's preposterous. But I haven't received that. So, anyway, I'm going to rewatch Clarkson's Farm. If you like me ranting in videos like this, please leave a like, please subscribe. What a world. What a world.